Carl Blue. Carl Blue was convicted of murdering his ex-girlfriend, Carmen Richards, by dousing her with gasoline and setting her on fire in 1994. Boy, you talk about cruel. He was executed on February 21, 2013, and he was located and executed at the Huntsville unit in Texas. He was executed by a lethal injection. His last words were, Blue expressed love for his family and victim's family, stating, I never meant to hurt you all. Tell my kids I love them. I love you all. I'm sorry. He was served a standard prison meal for his last meal. Gary Ray Boyles, a convicted serial killer, and he was convicted of murdering 6 men in 1994, targeting gay men along the I-95 corridor. He was executed on August 22, 2019, at the Florida State Prison in Rayford, Florida. He was executed by a lethal injection, and in a handwritten statement, he apologized for the pain and suffering he caused, stating, I never wanted this to be my life. You don't wake up one day and decide to become a serial killer. Well, I think maybe you must. Anyway, his last meal were 3 cheeseburgers, French fries, and bacon. Kenneth Boyd. Kenneth Boyd was convicted in the 1988 murders of his estranged wife, Julie Boyd, and her father, Thomas Curry. He was executed on December 2, 2005. He was located at the Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, and he was executed by a lethal injection. Boyd's final statement included, I'm sorry for what I've done. I'm up here for the mistakes I've made. His last meal was a well-done steak, baked potato with sour cream, salad with ranch dressing, a Pepsi, and a slice of pecan pie. Eric Scott Branch. Eric Scott Branch was convicted of the 1993 rape and murder of Susan Morris, a University of West Florida student. He was executed on February 22, 2018, and he was executed at the Florida State Prison in Rayford, Florida. He was executed by a lethal injection. His last words, he screamed, "Murderers, murderers, murderers," just before his execution. He declined a special last meal and was served a standard prison meal. Alvin Braziel. Alvin Braziel was convicted of the 1993 murder of Douglas White during a robbery, also sexually assaulting White's wife. He was executed on December 11, 2018, and was executed at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. He was executed by a lethal injection. He apologized to his victim's family, saying, I would like to apologize for the grief and pain that I've caused you all. I pray that you will forgive me. And as we know, Texas offers no special prison meal, but receive the standard prison fare. Next up is Jeffrey Dahmer. He murdered 17 young men and boys involving necrophilia and cannibalism. He died on November 28, 1994. And he was actually not executed, but he was killed by an inmate. He was located at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. His last words, I don't care if I live or die. Go ahead and kill me. And we don't have a record of his last meal either as far as that goes. Christopher Emmett. Christopher Emmett was convicted of the 2001 murder of his co-worker, John Langley, whom he fatally beat with a brass lamp in Danville, Virginia motel room to rob him and purchase crack cocaine. He was executed on July 24, 2008, and he was located at the Greensville Correctional Center in Jarrett, Virginia. He was executed by a lethal injection. His last words were, tell the governor he just lost my vote. Y'all hurry this thing along. I'm dying to get out of here. His last meal was not publicly documented. Charles Brooks, Jr. Charles Brooks, Jr. was convicted of the 1976 murder of David Gregory, a mechanic whom he and an accomplice abducted and killed during a car test drive. He was executed on December 7, 1982, at the Huntsville unit in Texas. He died by a lethal injection, and he was the first person in the United States to be executed using lethal injection. His last words, he recited a prayer in Arabic. His last meal was a T-bone steak, French fries with ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, biscuits, peach cobbler, and iced tea. Arthur Brown, Jr. Arthur Brown Jr. was convicted of the 1992 drug-related murders of 4 people, including a pregnant woman in Houston, Texas. He was executed on March 9, 2023, at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. He was executed by a lethal injection. He maintained his innocence, saying, "What is occurring here tonight is not justice. It's murder of an innocent man for a murder that occurred in 1992. And as we know, there's no special meals in Texas. He was just served the standard prison meal." Gary Burris. Gary Burris was convicted of a 1980 murder of a cab driver, Kenneth Chambers, in Indianapolis, Indiana. He was executed on November 20th, 1997. He was executed at the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, Indiana. He was executed by a lethal injection, and his final statement was, "Let's rock and roll, let's get this show on the road." His last meal, a cheeseburger, French fries, and a chocolate milkshake. Alva Campbell. Alva Campbell was convicted of the 1997 murder of an 18-year-old Charles Dials during a carjacking in Columbus, Ohio. His execution was originally scheduled for November 15th of 2017. However, the execution was called off later after officials failed to find a suitable vein for the lethal injection. So that's kind of weird. I guess he's currently incarcerated at the Chillicothe Correctional Institution in Ohio, even though his execution was attempted by lethal injection but unsuccessful. On March 3, 2018, Franklin County Prosecutor Ron O'Brien announced that Campbell had died of natural causes. He was 69 years old, had cancer, lung disease, asthma, and heart problems. In last words, he did not really have an opportunity to make a final statement during the attempted execution. His last meal was, he did request pork chops, greens, sweet potato pie, mashed potatoes, and gravy. That's kind of strange. Ruben Montoya Cantu. Ruben Montoya Cantu was convicted of a 1984 murder of Pedro Gomez during an attempted robbery in San Antonio, Texas, at the age of 17. He was executed on August 24th in 1993 at the Huntsville unit of the Texas prison system in Huntsville, Texas. He was executed by a lethal injection. When asked if he had a final statement, he said, "No, sir." His last meal, he requested a bubblegum, which was denied. Next up is Juan Castillo. Juan Edward Castillo, also known as the San Antonio Lovers Lane Killer. His crime was in December of 2003. Castillo and accomplices, including his girlfriend Deborah Espinosa, orchestrated a plan to rob 19-year-old Tommy Garcia. Espinosa lured Garcia to a secluded area with the promise of drugs and sex. Once there, Castillo attempted to rob Garcia. When Garcia resisted, Castillo fatally shot him. He was executed on May 16, 2018. He was held and executed at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. His execution style was lethal injection. His last words were, "To everyone that has been there for me, you know you are. I love y'all. See ya on the other side." That's it. His last meal? As we know, Texas doesn't offer a special last meal, so he just received the standard prison fare. James Lee Clark. James Lee Clark was convicted of the 1993 rape and murder of a 17-year-old Shari Catherine Cruz in Denton County, Texas. He was executed on April 11, 2007, at the Huntsville unit of the Texas prison system in Huntsville, Texas. He died by a lethal injection, and when asked if he had a final statement, he chuckled nervously and said, I don't know. He did not request a special meal. James Colburn. James Colburn was convicted of the 1994 murder of a 55-year-old Peggy Murphy, whom he attempted to rape and then strangled in his apartment in Conroe, Texas. He was executed on March 26, 2003. He was executed at the Huntsville unit in Texas, and he died by a lethal injection. His last words, "The statement that I would like to make is none of this should have happened, and now I'm dying, there's nothing left to worry about. I know it was a mistake. I have no one to blame but myself. It's no big deal about choosing right from wrong." Of course, there were no special meals that he had because he was in Texas. Richard Cooey. Richard Cooey was convicted for the 1986 rape and murder of 2 University of Akron students, Don McCreary and Windy Alfredo in Ohio. He was executed on October 14, 2008, at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville, Ohio. He was executed by a lethal injection. His last words, "For what? You haven't paid any attention to anything I've said in the last 22 and a half years. Why would anybody pay attention to anything I've got to say now?" Well, that's probably a reasonable comment. Fair observation. His last meal was a T-bone steak with A1 sauce. All right, he's getting back at him a little bit. Onion rings, French fries, 4 eggs over easy, hash browns, buttered toast, bear claw pastries, a pint of Rocky Mountain ice cream, and a Diet Coke. There you go. William Jasper Darden. William Jasper Darden was convicted of the 1973 murder of James Carl Turman during a robbery at a furniture store in Lakeland, Florida. He was executed on March 15, 1988, at the Florida State Prison in Rayford, Florida. He was executed by electrocution. He did not make a final statement, and he declined a special meal and was served the regular prison meal, but he did not eat it. James Hubbard. James Hubbard was convicted of the 1977 murder of a 62-year-old Lillian Montgomery in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He was executed on August 5, 2004, at the Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama. He was executed by a lethal injection, and his last words, "I want to thank my family for standing by me through all this. I appreciate their love." His last meal was a breakfast consisting of eggs, grits, toast, and coffee. John Hummel. John Hummel was convicted of the 2009 murders of his pregnant wife, Joy Hummel, and his 5-year-old daughter, Jody, and his father-in-law, Clyde Bedford, in Fort Worth, Texas. He was executed on June 30th of 2021 at the Texas State Penitentiary at Huntsville, Texas. He was executed by a lethal injection. His last words, "Yes, sir, I want to thank all of you. I love you all. I want to thank all of you for supporting me. I want to thank the Lord Jesus Christ for giving me strength. I want to ask for forgiveness. I'm ready to go home." His last meal was the regular prison meal of chicken patties, mashed potatoes, country gravy, green beans, and sliced bread. Corey Johnson. Corey Johnson was convicted of 7 murders in 1992 in Richmond, Virginia, as a member of the Newton Gang, a drug trafficking organization. He was executed on January 14, 2021, at the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. He was executed by lethal injection. His last words in his final statement, he apologized for his crimes, expressing remorse to the families of the victims and thanking his family for their help. His last meal included pizza and a strawberry shake. Gregory Scott Johnson. Gregory Scott Johnson was convicted of the 1985 murder of 82-year-old Ruby Hulslar in Anderson, Indiana. He was executed on May 25, 2005, at the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, Indiana. He was executed by a lethal injection. His last words included an apology to the victim's family and expressions of remorse for his actions. His last meal, he requested a pizza and a birthday cake, which he shared with his family. Robert Comer. Robert Comer committed a crime and was convicted of murdering Larry Pritchard at an Apache Lake campsite in Arizona. He also kidnapped and sexually assaulted a 19-year-old woman. He was executed on May 22, 2007, and was held at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence, Arizona. His execution type was lethal injection. Last words, "Go Raiders," referencing his support for the Oakland Raiders. His last meal was fried okra, 4 buns with butter and salt, and 2 slices of banana bread. Claude Jones. Claude Jones was convicted in the 1989 murder of a liquor store owner, Alan Heitzendegger, in Point Blank, Texas. He was executed on December 7th in 2000. He was held at the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas. He was executed by a lethal injection. He did decline a final statement, but his last meal he requested a large meat pizza. Troy Davis. Troy Davis was convicted in 1991 for the 1989 murder of police officer Mark McPhail in Savannah, Georgia. Davis maintained his innocence throughout the trial and appeals. He was executed on September 21, 2011, and was held at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison in Jackson, Georgia. He was executed by a lethal injection, and his last words, he maintained his innocence, saying, "I did not have a gun that night. I did not shoot your family member." Well, sounds pretty definitive. He declined to have a special last meal and was offered the standard prison meal tray. John Wayne Gacy. His crime was murdering 33 young men and boys. He was executed on May 10, 1994 at the Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois. He was executed by lethal injection. His last meal was fried shrimp, a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, French fries, and strawberries. That sounds pretty good to me. His last words were, "Kiss my ass." Angel Nieves Diaz. Angel Nieves Diaz was convicted for the 1979 murder of Joseph Nagy, the manager of a Miami strip club, during a robbery. He was executed on December 13, 2006, at the Florida State Prison in Rayford, Florida. He was executed by a lethal injection, and during his last words, he stated he maintained his innocence, stating in Spanish, "The state of Florida is killing an innocent person." His last meal, he declined a special last meal and was offered the standard prison meal tray. Jack Harold Jones, Jr. Jack Harold Jones, Jr. was convicted of multiple murders, including a 1995 rape and murder of Mary Phillips in Arkansas. He was executed on April 24, 2017, and was located at the Cummins Unit in Lincoln County, Arkansas. He was executed by a lethal injection. In his last words, he expressed remorse for his crimes and apologized to the victim's family, stating, "I hope over time you can learn who I really am. I am not a monster." His last meal was fried chicken, potato logs with tartar sauce, beef jerky bites, 3 candy bars, a chocolate milkshake, and fruit punch. James Allen Red Dog. James Allen Red Dog pled no contest to the 1991 murder of Hugh Pennington in Wilmington, Delaware. Red Dog had a history of violent crimes, including previous convictions for armed robbery and involvement in multiple killings. He was executed on March 3, 1993. He was held at the Delaware Correctional Center in Smyrna, Delaware. He was executed by a lethal injection. Red Dog thanked his family and friends for their support and then said to the remaining witnesses, "As for the rest of you, you can all kiss my ass." His last meal, there are no specific details about his last meal. Robert Drew. Robert Drew was convicted of the 1983 stabbing death of a 17-year-old Jeffrey Mays in Texas. Drew and an accomplice, Ernest Pluralowski, killed Mays after he gave them a ride in exchange for gas money. He was executed on August 2, 1994, at the Huntsville Unit in Huntsville, Texas. He was executed by a lethal injection. He denounced the death penalty, stating, "Keep up the fight. The death penalty is legal murder. They've taken the life of an innocent man." For a last meal, he requested a last meal of fried chicken, French fries, and a chocolate milkshake. Not bad fare. John David Duty. John David Duty, while serving a life sentence for a 1978 conviction of rape, robbery, and shooting with intent to kill, Duty was convicted of the first-degree murder for strangling his cellmate, Curtis J. Wise, Jr., on December 2001 at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. He was executed on December 16, 2010. He was held at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma. He was executed by lethal injection, marking the first use of phenobarbital in United States executions due to the shortage of sodium pentoethal. His last words, "I hope one day you'll be able to forgive me, not for my sake, but for your own. Thank you, Lord Jesus, I'm going home." For his last meal, he had a double cheeseburger with mayonnaise, a foot-long hot dog with cheese, mustard, and onions, a cherry limeade, and a banana shake.